What was supposed to be just an ordinary annual vacation turned out completely differently for Robert this year. As he did every year, he once again drove his own car. He hated being cooped up in hotels or holiday resorts, and rental cars were absolutely not his thing. It had nothing to do with wanting to show off his outrageously expensive off-road vehicle. He simply felt safe and comfortable in it. The first few days passed quite normally. He had checked into the luxury hotel and started exploring the area with his car. Robert wasn't the type to lie on the beach and roast himself. He didn't join in the theatrics of his employees who, at the end of their holidays, measured the quality of their vacation by how tanned they were. According to their theory, the skin cancer patients must have had the very best holidays of all. Robert much preferred driving through the countryside in his luxury Jeep, enjoying the peace of nature untouched by tourism. His exceptionally capable off-road vehicle came in very handy for this, because he usually found the most beautiful spots on rocky tracks far from paved roads. That's exactly what happened on this particular day, the day that would completely change his life. Once again he was torturing his Jeep up a steep, rocky, bumpy path. The sun blazed fiercely from the sky, and the air conditioning of the SUV howled through the otherwise absolute silence of the mountain landscape that opened up before him. When he reached the summit, Robert got out. The heat hit him like a club over the head the moment he left the air-conditioned car, but the next instant a pleasant mountain breeze cooled him down again. Purposefully, he walked toward a small house that had been built up here in the middle of what otherwise appeared to be untouched nature. It was not a ruin or a dilapidated hut, as one usually finds in such places. It was a lovingly built and well-maintained home, clad in natural stone, with a breathtaking view over the entire valley. As if it were the most natural thing in the world, Robert sat down on a small bench made of natural stone in front of the house and enjoyed the view and the pleasant breeze blowing through his hair. It was his first time here, yet everything felt so familiar, as if he were home. After a while he stood up, fetched a bucket fitted with a long chain from a small shed, walked around the house, pushed aside the thick wooden cover over the well beneath it, and drew himself a bucket of fresh well water. Then he filled a glass with the water and, once back on the bench, drank it with relish. Only after he had put the glass and bucket away did Robert startle. How did he know where to find the bucket and the glass? How did he know there was a well behind the house? Only now did he realize that everything had felt familiar from the very first moment, even though he had definitely never been here before. It was like a sign from fate, and he felt an irresistible urge to get to the bottom of it. Over the next few days he drove out to this mountain refuge every single day and spent the whole day up there. It wasn't planned. He hadn't even really wanted to. It was more like a compulsion, an invisible force that kept commanding him back. Resisting was pointless. He always gave in. A few nights later he lay awake in his hotel room. He simply couldn't fall asleep. He felt as if he were trapped in a prison cell, and the urge to break out grew stronger with every minute. Just after midnight he decided to leave the hotel and drive up to the mountain refuge. When he arrived 2 hours later, he felt transformed. He became calm, comfortable, safe. More than that, he felt at home. He went into the house, lit 2 candles that, along with the matches, were in the little cupboard beside the fireplace, and in the candlelight looked for the bed linen. It has to be here somewhere in the bedroom cupboard, but the cupboard was empty. Suddenly Robert remembered. The bed linen was in the living room cupboard next to the fireplace, so the draft from the chimney would keep it from going musty. Sure enough, that's exactly where he found it. He no longer puzzled over how he could possibly remember this when he had never been here before. He had long since grown accustomed to the phenomenon. He simply made the bed and fell contentedly asleep. The next morning his decision was made. He had to track down the owner of the property and buy it. From now on he wanted to spend every holiday, in fact all his time, only here, in this mysteriously familiar place. It took the rest of his vacation to locate the owner, an old man who lived a few villages away, and complete the purchase, but it was worth it to him. The drive home that year was torture. Every single kilometer dragged as though he had to walk it, and with every kilometer an ever-growing unease gripped him. That unease grew so intense that on his first day back at work he immediately summoned his deputy director to his office. "You're fired with immediate effect." Robert greeted him aggressively. The deputy was so stunned he couldn't get a word out. "There are exactly two options for you now," Robert continued. "Either you pack your things right this minute and disappear. I'm giving you precisely 30 minutes from now." He glanced at his watch and noted the time. "Or you buy the company from me and fire me. I don't care whether you pay me outright or in installments. So, your decision." The deputy didn't need long to think. He had secretly dreamed of this scenario countless times, imagining what offer he would make his boss and how best to sell it to him. Now he didn't even need to sell it. The proposal was coming straight from the boss himself. "I was thinking 1.5 million. $500,000 up front and the rest." "Fine," Robert interrupted. "You already have my account details. Our company lawyers will handle the rest. If you'll excuse me now." Robert grabbed his briefcase and the box in which he had already packed his personal belongings, and left the office. "You fired the deputy director?" his secretary asked in disbelief and slight fear. "Not exactly," Robert replied with a broad grin. "He fired me." With ringing laughter he left his bewildered secretary behind and walked out of his former company, cheerful and relieved. The company that had once been his life's work, that had meant everything to him, had suddenly become a ton-weight rock threatening to crush him. Now he was free of that burden. He got into his car and, as naturally as ever, drove back to his beloved mountain refuge. The journey back felt like a journey into freedom. With every kilometer that brought him closer to his new home, he felt better and freer. Robert had just reached the point where he left the paved road to turn onto the unpaved mountain track when he began to ponder. The old man hadn't been to the property in years, yet it was neither overgrown nor looked abandoned. It felt as if someone had been living there the whole time. Yet during the days he had spent up there, no one else had appeared. It was strange, and try as he might, he couldn't explain it. When he finally arrived at the top, he found the explanation. The front door stood open, and when he stepped inside he found a woman sitting in a wicker chair in front of the fireplace. He was about to raise his voice and order the woman out of his house when the breath caught in his throat. The woman turned to him and greeted him in an incredibly warm, loving voice. "Hola, Roberto." Robert stood frozen, unable to speak. Yes, she was quite possibly the most beautiful woman he had ever seen, but that wasn't it. It was the shock of believing he knew this woman he had never laid eyes on before. It took several seconds before he regained his senses. This was all utter nonsense. He had never seen her before, and the feeling that he knew her must simply be wishful thinking because she was stunningly beautiful. "Hello," he finally managed when he had collected himself a little. "There must be some misunderstanding. This is my house, and my name is Robert, not Roberto." The woman smiled at him, sending hot and cold shivers down his spine. "Of course it's your house, Roberto. I'm not disputing that at all. I've merely been living here for the past few months, but if you want me to, I'll leave. It is your house, after all." Yes, it was his house, and he somehow felt that this house, which he had only bought a few days ago, had always been his. He already had enough to do sorting out these confused thoughts and feelings. There was absolutely no room right now for a mysterious woman who had appeared out of nowhere and was driving him completely out of his remaining mind. No question about it. This woman had to go, the sooner the better. "No, I don't think I should throw you out," he heard himself answer, as if hypnotized and against his own will. "There's plenty of room for both of us. But don't call me Roberto. My name is Robert. If you want proof, I carved my name into a rock here long ago. Come, I'll show you." In that moment he could have slapped himself. Not because he had given in to this woman's irresistible aura, nor because the name supposedly carved into the rock might exist only in his imagination. He certainly hadn't carved it during this holiday, but because he suddenly remembered that he had also carved his wife's name beneath it and surrounded both names with a heart. Nonsense, he tried to convince himself. Your imagination is really running away with you now. Just be careful you don't go completely mad. Now he had to prove to himself that there were no names carved there, that it was all a product of his fantasy, and then he would send this woman off his property. When they finally reached the rock in question, Robert collapsed. His knees turned to butter in the Spanish sun, and he sank to the ground in front of the rock. Roberto Martinez de Vito y Rosa González Roca was carved there inside a heart. Speechless and stunned, Robert sat before the rock. The woman knelt beside him and laid a hand on his shoulder. An indescribable warmth radiated from that touch, spreading through his entire body, so intense that he barely felt the actual contact. "Rosa?" he asked after a long silence, looking into her face. She merely nodded. Robert had just sold his company, his life's work, had come here, met this unnaturally beautiful woman, and now this business with the heart on the rock. It was all too much at once. Silently he walked back to the house, his head pounding with the wildest, most incoherent thoughts. He poured himself a whiskey to calm down, constantly accompanied by Rosa, who followed him silently like a shadow. Finally, somewhat numbed by the whiskey, he lay down on his bed and fell asleep. When he woke the next morning, he first had to work out where he was and which parts of the chaos hammering inside his skull were real and which were fantasy. He was in the little mountain house, and lying beside him was Rosa, smiling at him. Either he was ready for the asylum, or this was all just a dream. But if it was a dream, surely it was time to wake up. On the other hand, the warm sensation that was once again flooding through his body at that moment was reason enough to keep dreaming a little longer. Enough, Robert finally said to himself. The house up here in the mountains is as real as the fact that I sold my company, but this woman. She sneaks in, casts a spell over me, and like an idiot I fall for it. She's probably a known con artist who seduces wealthy men and then strips them bare. He decided to get to the bottom of it that very day. He slipped out of bed and made coffee. Drawn by the aroma, Rosa practically floated to the breakfast table, yet she ate nothing and merely inhaled the scent of the coffee through her nose without drinking a drop. Did she suspect he had seen through her game and feared a sleeping drug in the coffee? Whatever the case, Robert pretended not to notice her wariness. After breakfast, he calmly went outside and sat on the bench in front of the house. As expected, she followed and sat down beside him. "Let's take a photo of the two of us," he suggested with false innocence, stood up without waiting for an answer, set up the camera in front of them, and activated the self-timer. Once the camera had taken the picture, he looked satisfied at the image on the small screen. The police should be able to identify the woman from this, he thought. Under the pretext of having errands to run in the village, he said goodbye to Rosa and drove down to the village. The police officers studied the photo but could see no woman in it. The picture showed only a man sitting on a bench in front of a ruined house. Robert snatched the camera back, and indeed, there he was on a bench in front of a dilapidated hut. "Does the name Rosa González Roca mean anything to you?" he finally asked the officers. They nodded. Of course, like everyone in the village, they knew the name. They explained that Rosa González Roca and her husband Roberto Martinez de Vito had once come here from Andalusia, bought the entire valley and mountain, and given the local people work. Unlike other large landowners, they had paid their workers well and brought prosperity to the area. The very existence of the village was thanks to the two of them, which is why a memorial service was still held every year on the anniversary of their deaths. Robert went as white as the village walls. "When did they die?" he asked in a flat voice. "Roberto died 98 years ago. Rosa 3 years later," one of the officers replied. Strength drained from him, Robert took the camera and shuffled wordlessly back to his car. Like an automaton, he drove back up the mountain. When he arrived, he got out weakly and dragged himself to the bench. Rosa sat silently beside him and watched as he looked at the photo again. The house was now clearly visible in full glory, and there beside him on the bench sat Rosa. "What is happening here?" he asked tonelessly. Rosa took him in her arms. "It's hard to explain and even harder to understand. When you died 98 years ago, my world collapsed. I swore then that I would wait here for you until you returned, but you didn't come back. 3 years later, I died of grief. We were both reborn and lived new lives without any memory of the past one. Unlike me, however, You had a fatal car accident at the age of 43 and were reborn again. I, on the other hand, died of old age 6 months ago. Yet somehow I was not reborn again. Instead I remembered my old vow, returned here, and waited for you. And what can I say? You really did come back. The fact that you are now a being of flesh and blood while I am a bodiless spirit, well, that's an unforeseen complication. And that you are now living between two worlds, that's probably my fault. But I simply had to have you back. Of course you can leave at any time. As soon as you leave this mountain you'll be back in your real, material world, and all of this will have been just a dream, as you saw in the photo. Even if I wanted to, I'm not allowed to keep you. So if you want to go. Robert stared down into the valley for a long time, his gaze empty. And what if I don't want to go? Rosa gently ran her hand through his hair. At least he felt the corresponding warmth. Before answering, then we stay here together, until death unites us. Robert looked at her for minutes without saying a word. Then, finally, he said, I think I prefer this version.